Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that we see in the training community a lot, particularly the evidence-based side, that isn't necessarily true in the context of larger programming. And that's this whole idea that every exercise that we select needs to be the most efficient exercise possible with maximum muscle fiber recruitment and as all the different heads of any muscle as we can possibly do. In other words, it will be stuff like, well, you should probably do your chest presses with dumbbells because you can get a deeper stretch. Well, in theory, except that we have a lot of specialty bars that do the same thing. It's a nice hypothesis. And I'm just using that as one example. But here's the problem we run into with that. Individual sets start to lose their meaning in the context of a higher volume program. In other words, focusing on details like that become very, very important. Become very important if you're going to do really, really minimalist volume training. Right? In other words, if you're going to drop yourself down to the lowest volume possible, because maybe you want to get a 30-minute workout in and you want to be in and out of the gym in 30 minutes 3 times a week or something crazy like that. All right, thinking like that might have some merit. Okay? Might have some merit. Why? Because we're getting less total sets, less total work. But here's the problem that we have. You see people promoting stuff like this who themselves do not train anywhere near failure. Or if you look at their percentages, they're doing stuff like 60% of their 1 rep max for sets of 10, 50% of their 1 rep max for sets of 10. Okay, at that point, the exercises that you select don't matter that much because you're not getting that much hypertrophy on a set for set basis. Okay, because you're just simply not training hard enough. And in other words, you could take an exercise, let's say that you prove conclusively that you get better pectoral stimulation in I don't know, the middle and lower pec with a dumbbell versus a barbell bench. Let's say you proved it. But let's say you're coming in and you're stopping 3 or 4 reps short of failure with the dumbbell presses, and the benching you're stopping 1 rep short of failure. Which one's going to cause more muscle growth per set? The flat bench. Because an inferior exercise taken closer to failure than a supposedly superior exercise stimulates more growth. It just simply does. Because you might say, well, since I'm moving this through this entire range of motion, and we could argue that really you're just getting some of the extra fibers that may be most related to those joint angle specificity, and because you're going to be going heavier with the barbell with more tension, some of the other muscle fibers might be getting stimulated more. Okay, so that's not even an absolute. And I'm not saying range of motion doesn't matter, it does, but sometimes in that context, that extra inch of range of motion may not be giving you significantly more amount of hypertrophy. It might be giving you a little more. Hypothetically, it could be. And we shouldn't rule that out. But there's no guarantee that it is. No guarantee that it is. Because we have to think in terms of the total activation through the range of motion that we're using and the tensions and things involved. But what we do know is that going closer to failure produces more muscle growth because more total muscle fibers and upper threshold fibers get fatigued. And even though you might have an exercise that might, in theory, have the potential to stimulate more total muscle fibers, because that's what you're looking at. That's what you're saying. At this exercise, I think it's better because it has the potential to. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. But if you don't reach that potential, then it doesn't matter. If you didn't push the set hard enough, the slightly inferior exercise still stimulated more growth and got to more muscle fibers. It still achieved it better. So in that context, if you're just not training hard enough, the better exercise selection will still not give you the same amount of muscle growth that the other one will. The effort matters. Then we get into the whole context of exercise selection. If you want to get the most muscle fibers possible, why don't you do 2 different exercises? In other words, you could rant all that you want about, well, this flat dumbbell press, but what about if you do a barbell flat bench and a barbell incline, right? Let's say you were going to do 6 total sets of the dumbbell chest press, but you do 3 sets of flat bench, 3 sets of incline. You've actually hit a wider variety of muscle fibers by using the 2 exercises. Okay, you've hit two completely different angles. I almost guarantee you that that combination of two exercises is going to stimulate more hypertrophy than the single exercise. This has been studied too. We know that using more exercises for the same amount of volume seems to have a small advantage in terms of total hypertrophy. Now, we could argue, well, if we want some specificity, then we need more work with that one movement. Okay, that's fine. In a specificity, particularly a strength context, I'm not going to disagree with you. But we could also argue that more total hypertrophy is going to give you more strength potential too. But again, come over to the point that two different exercises combined together is superior to using one exercise, even if you're convinced that one exercise is better. It usually is going to be, unless they're really bad exercises. Okay, so you have that to factor in. Then we come over to the other point. What about total volume? None of this stuff matters that much when volume gets really high. If you're pushing close to the maximum volume you can recover from, do you really think any of those extra ranges of motion matter? No. Because you've probably stimulated as much muscle growth as you're going to get with fewer sets. So even if you're using a slightly inferior exercise, when volume starts to go up, it doesn't matter, because you're still going to recruit all the available muscle fibers, especially if they're hard sets. I'm not talking about these people who are leaving 5 reps in reserve and doing 20 sets. Okay, that doesn't work the same. We know it doesn't. We know it doesn't based upon the data. But if you're doing hard sets, as volume starts to go up, this stuff just simply doesn't matter anymore. Hey, it doesn't matter, because you're doing so much training volume with so many different exercises with hard sets that the individual exercise that in a single set environment might have been superior, because that's what we're talking about. It doesn't matter, because you are eventually exhausting all the available muscle fibers anyways in a training session. And that's the ironic thing, is that we should be looking in terms of, hey, what's my optimal amount of volume, rather than what's the most I can get away with. But you'll see these same people, the same experts and people out there who are telling you, oh, no, these exercises, we need to focus on getting the most hypertrophy possible out of every set, will also have you do ludicrous amounts of sets. You know what? At that point, the exercise selection probably doesn't even matter anymore for hypertrophy purposes. It probably doesn't matter that much, because your overall training volumes start to get so high that you fatigue the muscles completely anyways. In fact, I would argue that you may be getting inferior growth unless you're boosting your recovery and work capacity with a bunch of gear. And if you're not boosting your recovery and work capacity with gear, you're probably just getting less muscle growth anyways, no matter what you selected, because you just did too much work. And you start getting into a lot of low quality sets, and it takes you longer to recover from them. They just beat up recovery. So it's interesting when you see this. The same people who make a big deal about exercise selection, the way that they train, it probably doesn't matter that much anyways. Probably doesn't matter that much anyways at that point. These things that we're arguing about or talking about only matter in the context of doing the minimum amount of training. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.